I've told the story more than once in these classes that we've been doing now for almost 6 years or 7 years. But I want to repeat the story again because it's a story that's much more than a story. It's a story that's a piece of life, and the Rike is a piece of Yiddishkeit, and particularly it's a piece of Chassidus. This is the story. The Tzemach Tzedek and the Ruzhiner Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael, the Heilige Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, were contemporaries. The Ruzhiner Rebbe was born 7 years after the Tzemach Tzedek and passed away 15 years before the Tzemach Tzedek. The Ruzhiner lived 54 years, Tzemach Tzedek lived 76 years. But they were contemporaries. They physically never met, but they communicated in various ways. They had a very strong relationship and an enormous amount of mutual respect. They communicated by sending shluchim ehasam lahacham ehacham lahasam. They sent emissaries to represent them in their various different consultations and other issues that they needed each other for. And in addition, there's indications, quite clear indications, that they communicated using spiritual methods, telepathically or something to that effect. So one of the stories about the meaning of Lubavitch and Ruzhin is the following story. Rabbi Ezel Homler was a chassid from Alten Rebbe, from the Mittele. He wasn't the youngest, who had moedenik arichas yomim. I suspect that he had a bracha from the Alten Rebbe for arichas yomim, although I don't know for sure. And a bracha from the Alten Rebbe for arichas yomim was between 90 and 100 years. He passed away in Tafresh Yud Zayin, less than 10 years before the Rebbe did Tzemach Tzedek. And when the Tzemach Tzedek was born, he was already a chassid. So Rabbi Ezel was by the Alter Rebbe, by the Mittler Rebbe, and by the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek. But at Tzemach Tzedek, he was from the Gor Greise. He was from the Ziknei Achsidim, and the Tzemach Tzedek himself was Mechabev and Meyakir Rabbi Ezel. He was a very big chassid. The previous Rebbe, when wishing to describe this personality in his Igris Kedish, refers to him as Harav Hagon Ho'amiti, and he doesn't write Hey Reish Hey Gimel in an abbreviation. He actually writes out the words Harav Hagon Ho'amiti Ish Ho'ashkeles. Ish Ho'ashkeles is explained in the Gemara to mean Ish Asher Kol Ba. He was an incredibly complete Adam, a mensch, Zeira Größer. And the Tzemach Tzedek, who was much younger than Rabbi Ezel, sent Rabbi Isaac Homler as his shliach to Ruzhin for a certain mission. Now, if the Tzemach Tzedek was between 15 and 20 years or more younger than Rabbi Isaac Homler, the Ruzhiner Rav was 7 years younger than that. So the Rabbi Ezel was much older than the Ruzhiner. But Rabbi Ezel understood that the Ruzhiner is a tzaddik elyon. The Ruzhiner is the highest madrega of tzaddik. And youth and sagacity is immaterial, irrelevant. So he made a decision on his journey to Ruzhin that he was going to be Mesim Lev. He's going to pay attention to every single hanhaga of the Ruzhiner. And he was there from Friday till Sunday, I suppose. And he brought back with him a handful of stories that became part of Chabad lore about the Ruzhiner Rav from this Shabbos that he spent by the Heilige Ruzhiner Rebbe. One of the stories that he came back with was as follows, and I believe I told it even quite recently. The Ruzhiner did not have a permanent gabbai, a man who was paid to oversee his responsibilities and his public service and so on. There was a rotation of chassidim. There were very special chassidim in Ruzhin who would spend a period of time, let's say 3 weeks or a month, being the active gabbai, and then they would go back to their business or their whatever it was, and somebody else took their place. This chassid was called in Ruzhin the Mekurev for the duration of his skarvus to the Heilige Ruzhiner. The Seder by the Ruzhiner was, people came for Shabbos, all kinds of people came for Shabbos, and of course the Ruzhiner was a Rebbe in the Derech Chassidishe Parshah. He gave Shalom, he gave Shirayim, the Moed the Koises, Umayvsim. The whole Shabbos was Gili Alakus. Sunday, the Ruzhiner Pravet. That means that people would come to him with their issues. And the way he Pravet was in public. He would sit at the head of the table. People would present their issues to the Mekurev, and the Mekurev would present them to the Ruzhiner Rav, and the Ruzhiner Rav would say what to do. Now, I don't know how this was handled when people had very intimate and personal matters, but Azoi, this was the Seder, and all the Chassidim could witness the Ruzhiner's involvement with all kinds of questions and all kinds of matters each Sunday. So the Shabbos at the Rabbi Zalman spent with the Heilige Ruzhiner Rebbe. So that Sunday, 2 Chassidim came amongst many for Shabbos, and what they wanted from the Ruzhiner was a haskama for a sefer. Each one of them wrote a sefer, and they wanted a haskama. Now, for the purposes of full disclosure, haskamas in those days were really more than anything else notices of copyright, because people invested a lot of money to typeset and to publish a sefer, and to do reprinting was much, much cheaper. So they wanted to protect their investment. So you'd get a Gadol B'Yisrael to write a letter outlawing the duplication of the sefer till a certain date, or until the sefer would not be reprinted within 5 years of that initial date, and so forth. So these 2 Chassidim came to the Ruzhiner for Shabbos, and Sunday they presented their Svarim to the Makurev to present to the Ruzhiner Rebbe. So the Makurev announces that there are 2 Chassidim who both wrote Svarim. One wrote a Sefer of Chassidishe Parshah, Lomdus, and the other one a Sefer of Sipurei Tzadikim. So the Ruzhiner said to the Makurev, read from the Sefer of Sipurei Tzadikim. So he read a little bit. And after he read, the Ruzhiner began to tell stories against the stories in that Sefer, to add more detail and more richness and more history and so forth. Then the Ruzhiner told the Makurev to read from the Chassidishe Parshah in the Sefer of Lomdus, which the Makurev did. And the Ruzhiner then began to be mafalpal on that particular sugya that the Mechaber had written, that the Makurev read, with Grois Go'oines, with Grois Bekiyas, and Grois Bechnifis. It was the Ruzhiner, the Baal Shem Tov's name, the Besitcher Maggid's Or Einikel, but he was named after the Baal Shem Tov Yisrael, and so on. Rabbi Eisel is watching this, and he's thinking to himself, 2 people wrote Sfarim. One wrote a Sefer Chassidishe Parshah. Another one collected stories. Which is a greater effort? Collecting stories is not much of an effort at all. Chassidishe Parshah, first of all, you have to be a Talmud Chacham in London, especially in those days. It wasn't like today. If a person was publishing a Sefer, it was not a Stam Alei London, it was a Gon, and a big Gon. And he probably worked very hard, B'chlal on Torah, and B'frat on his Sefer. Why would the Ruzhiner give precedence to the Sefer of Sipurei Tzadikim before the Sefer of Chassidishe Parshah in Lomdus? Clearly, Rabbi Eisel wasn't going to say anything. He kept his mouth closed. But he was thinking those thoughts. Suddenly, the Ruzhiner get azog. The Ruzhiner says, the Ruzhiner was one of those Jews who didn't have to be told. Dem Litvischen Gon is a wunder, he said. The genius from Lithuania, the Rabbi Eisel was a Chassid Alter Rebbe, which is Russia, which was Litva, is wondering why we first read and discussed and wrote the Haskama for the Sefer of Sipurei Tzadikim, and only afterwards did we read and discuss and give Haskam for the Sefer of Chassidishe Parshah. He says, Aber miram zeh gelernt from the Eibishter Allein. We learn from Hashem Yisbarach himself, who begins his Torah with Sefer HaYashar, Sefer Bereishis. And Sefer Bereishis is called Sefer HaYashar. Of course, Sefer HaYashar means the Sefer HaYeshorim, that the fair ones, that the righteous ones, that the holy ones are written in them, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankiv, and the Yud-Beit Shiftei Ka, the 12 Shvatim. And only afterwards comes the mitzvahs of the Torah, beginning with HaChedesh Hazel Lachem. So the Ruzhiner said, we did the same thing. We started off with Sipurei Tzadikim, which is Sefer HaYashar, and only afterwards we go on to Halachas. And of course, the significance of this, the fact that the Torah begins with these stories, and only afterwards do you have the mitzvahs of the Torah. And of course, the Rashi asks the question based on Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Lo haya tzarich lahaschas haTorah, ela me'achedesh hazel lachem. As the Rebbe explains, it's since Torah milishein heirah. Torah is supposed to teach us practical lessons. How were the stories of the Torah teaching us practical lessons? And the Rashi answers, Keach masav higid liyamei loslam nachlas goyim. But in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and other Sfarim, they bring down that the Reiv Seides HaTorah Gnuzim Ba'agodes, in Sefer Bereishis have many, many secrets of the Torah. In addition, it's brought that Sefer Bereishis is full of Midas Tevas. It teaches you good character. And of course, in addition, there's so many lessons and secrets that are hidden in Sefer Bereishis. One of them is, one of the basic advantages of Sefer Bereishis, and I'm going to add it right now because this Maamar is on Parshas Shemos, and the beginning of Sefer Shemos, where you have the Galus and Moshe Rabbeinu's birth and the Geula and the 10 Makis, which culminates in Parshas Boy and Beshalach, is the idea that the Ramban brings B'Shem HaMedrash that Maisa Oves Simin Labanim. What happened to the Avos is an indicator, is a sign what's going to happen later to the children. In different words, the history of the Jewish people and the history of the world is in Genesis, is in Bereshit, in the beginning of Shemos. These stories are so important and so unique and so intense, and each story is explaining something or revealing something which we believe, of course, that ein mikra yetzi midei pshutei. These stories and these words happen begashmes gepshutei, as the Torah tells us the stories. But in addition, these stories are the story of the world. They repeat themselves again and again and again. The idea of Avraham and Avimelech and Parei and the not having children and the birth of Yitzchak and Akedas Yitzchak and so on, the digging of wells. Every detail in Sefer Bereshit is a story that has within itself a message and a relevance which would repeat itself over time again and again and again. It's the story of history. So the Ramban writes, Maisa Avos Simin Labonim. The stories in the Torah would teach us how we should understand the events that would happen later and how we need to respond to them. So in the Sefer Bereshit, Genesis, Sefer Yossi, in the beginning of Sefer Shemos, with the story of Galus and Geula, you have represented not just stories about ancient holy people, not just lessons on Avodas Hashem, but the story of history that's going to repeat itself again and again and again. And of course, one of those stories is the story of Galus. Galus really begins with Parshas Vayetze, when Yaakov leaves Eretz Yisrael and goes into Galus. Certainly it continues in Parshas Vayeshev, when Yosef HaTzadik is sold into Galus. And it begins again in the beginning of Sefer Shemos when it says, Eile b'nei Shmes b'nei Yisrael aboyim Mitzrayma v'aytaniyim from Galus. And of course we understand that in Chassidishe these are various Galus. Later Galus is more severe than the earlier Galus, but there's still nevertheless a variety of different levels of Galus. Beginning, like I said to you before, with Esav and with Lavan and with Esav, and then of course Bikish Yankiv Leisha B'Shalva Koftzei Alav Rugzei Shal Yosef and so forth. So here's a Maamar, which is explaining the pasuk Ve'ele Shmeis B'nei Yisrael Aboyim Mitzrayim, explaining this pasuk about going into Galus. And he's going to analyze it. He's going to question what is the significance, what is the meaning of referencing and listing specifically by name all of the Shvatim as it relates to going into Galus. You'll see very soon, momentarily, that it's more complicated than that because it's already been said in Parshas Vayigash, so it's being actually repeated here a second time. But this Maamar and this pasuk and these questions are not just a philosophical or a mystical or a technical analysis of a pasuk. They are an analysis of psukim that reveal something that would repeat itself again and again and again and again. The concept of Galus and what Galus means, and what the challenge of Galus represents, and what surviving Galus represents, and what overcoming Galus represents, and revealing godliness as a consequence of the Galus represents, all of these ideas have to emerge. Because the psukim in the Torah are much, much more than a story, they're a living story. And that's how we have to learn this Maamar. It's actually quite long. It's not a very hard Maamar. It takes a little while to become familiar with it, but it's not a very, very difficult Maamar. We want to learn this Maamar and try to extract from this Maamar the timelessness of it, how the Maamar is speaking to us also, and to use a cliche or an expression that the Rebbe would frequently use, ukefi sheyes ba'al lekam, and we'll get back to this later on. So let's begin to read. Ve'ele shmeis b'nei Yisrael aboyim Mitzrayim. These are the names of the sons of Yisrael. And of course we know that Yisrael is Yaakov Avinu, aboyim Mitzrayim, which come into Mitzrayim. Although they've been in Mitzrayim for many years, Sefer Shemos begins again by saying, aboyim Mitzrayim, eis Yaakov, along with Yaakov Avinu, ishu beisevo, each one came with his family, and then the next pasuk says, Reuven v'Shimon, and so on. So the children of Israel came to Egypt together with Yaakov, eis Yaakov, and lived in Mitzrayim. It says the Rebbe, hine b'Parshas Vayigash ne'emar gamke, in Parshas Vayigash it's also written. These are the names of the sons of Israel come to Mitzrayim. And over there it says, Yaakov u'banav, that who came to Mitzrayim, Yaakov and his sons. So in Parshas Vayigash the implication is that Yaakov is one of the Bnei Yisrael. Right? In Parshas Shemos it says, Eis Yaakov. That means he came along with Yaakov. In Parshas Vayigash, it doesn't say the word Es, it simply says the word Yaakov, indicating that Yaakov is considered one of the Bnei Yisrael. So the Rebbe asks three questions, which for the most part are the same question in three different ways. And I just want to preface by telling you that there's a Rabbeinu B'chaya in Vayigash who argues something very wonderful. And that is that each one of the three Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, are also called Yisrael. Avraham is the name of the first Av, Yitzchak is the name of the second Av, Yaakov is the name of the third Av, and all of us know that Yaakov was given a second name, Yisrael. Rabbeinu B'chaya argues that Yisrael was the name of all three Avos. And one of his rights is here. Because when it says, in Vayigash, and then it says, Yaakov Ubanov. So if Yaakov is one of the Bnei Yisrael has to be Yitzchak. And he brings Nacharai, the Bnei Yisrael also includes Avraham. So the Rabbeinu B'chaya explains that Yisrael doesn't go on Yaakov Avinu, it goes on Yitzchak or Avraham. But the Rebbe doesn't explain it that way. The Rebbe says Bnei Yisrael means the children of Yaakov Avinu. So Bnei Yisrael means the children of Yaakov Avinu. What do you mean when you say Es Yaakov along with Yaakov Avinu? So the first question is, why does the Torah say twice about their coming into Egypt? Once in Parshas Vayigash when they initially arrived, and once in the beginning of Parshas Shemos when they're all going to die out. Why does it say twice the same Parshas? And of course in Parshas Vayigash he lists all 70 children. And in Parshas Shemos he lists only the 12 sons. But why does it have to repeat it twice? The second question is, there's differences between Parshas Vayigash and Parshas Shemos. Here it says that they came Mitzrayim along with Yaakov, so Yaakov is separate from them. They came to Mitzrayim, Yaakov, so Yaakov is considered one of the comers, one of the people who entered into Mitzrayim. And of course the question is, what's the significance of considering Yaakov one of the people that entered into Mitzrayim? And the third question is, when it says in Vayigash, the Bnei Yisrael came to Egypt, Yaakov along with his sons, this indicates, it means to say, literally translated, Shekel Yaakov Gamkin, B'chal Bnei Yisrael, Yaakov is considered one of the sons of Israel. And like the Rabbeinu B'chaya says, it goes on Yitzchak. Is it not true that Yaakov is himself Yisrael? Like it says in the Pasuk, so how could Yaakov both be the father, namely Yisrael, which all the Shvatim come, and at the same time he's placed amongst them as one of them. So in Parshas Vayigash, Yaakov is considered one of the sons of Israel coming to Egypt. And in Parshas Shemos, Yaakov is considered one who's coming to Egypt separate from the Shvat. And these are the questions. Why do you have to have twice the same Parsha? And why are there these differences between these two parshas? Now the questions we just asked are going to receive an answer. But it's going to be a while. This is not a difficult Maamar. There's some little aspects that you have to think a little bit, but it's a long Maamar, relatively speaking, but it's making simple points in a very direct and very understandable way, and it flows quite nicely. The end of the Maamar is going to be at the end of this Maamar. But let me give you a short introduction, and that is the following. This Maamar is about Galus. Or to tie it into the two Eilish Shmeises, the Eilish Shmeis in Parshas Vayigash and the Eilish Shmeis in Parshas Shemos, it's two different concepts of Galus. Why are there different concepts of Galus? Because there's different levels of Galus. Let's say going from Ein Sof to Atzilus is relatively speaking a Mitzrayim, a Galus. From going to Atzilus to Bria is relatively speaking a Galus. From going to Bria to Asiyah is weiter considered a Galus. And the Rebbe is going to explain how these two parshas are representing first an Eidel Galus, being in a state of constraint on a higher level, which is less concealing. And then the Parshas Shemos, our Parsha, is going to speak about a far greater level of constraint and containment, a subsequent Galus, a second Galus. That's going to be the answer, to be honest. But in describing the Galus in general, there's going to be a basic difference between how Galus is described in this Maamar and how Galus is described in many other Maamarim. I don't see them as contradictory, but clearly they're different. And perhaps it's a difference of level. How do we normally describe Galus? So the way to illustrate the description of Galus, you begin by description of Geula. How does Geula look? Geula looks as follows. There's a Beis HaMikdash, there's a Holy of Holies, and there is a Mochen L'Shiftei Yizbarech. There is a Mishkan, which is a place which is prepared, a seat for the Shechina. The Shechina lives and rests in the Beis HaMikdash, like the Pasuk says, Reichev Araves, Reichev HaKruvim. The Eibishter sits on the cherubs, on the chariot, which Kayachol brings the Eibishter in proximity with the world. This is called Hashras HaShechina, the Shechina manifesting. And then, of course, when you learn Kabbalah and Chassidus, you learn that something called Yichud Kutsha Brichu Shechinte. The Shechina which sits in the Beis HaMikdash has Kedusha or Kutsha Brichu hovering above it. So there's a seat. On the seat you have someone sitting in the seat. This is the Sheikhin or Shechina. And above the Sheikhin is Kedusha. And of course this is Pshat in the Gemara. Mikdash, the Ikri Mishkan, and Mishkan, the Ikri Mikdash. Both the Mishkan, which is the mobile house of God, the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and the Batei Mikdash. And of course in the word Mishkan, the key allusion is to the word Shechina. And in the Batei Mikdash, the key allusion is to the word Kedusha. So the Gemara says you should know Mishkan, the Ikri Mikdash, and Mikdash, the Ikri Mishkan. Don't think that the temporary Beis HaMikdash called Mishkan was Ikri for Shechina, and Kedusha was missing. Don't think that the primary house of God, the Beis HaMikdash, was about Kedusha and Shechina was considered redundant, unimportant. Nitazei, that's not the way it is. Shechina, the Mishkan, the Ikri Mikdash, and Mikdash, the Ikri Mishkan means that all of them, both the temporary and permanent homes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, had Shechina, and above the Shechina you have Kedusha. This is a classic understanding of the Beis HaMikdash. What happens in Galus? Happens in Galus, again, this is based on a Zoya. This is discussed in many, many places. In Chassidus, when you have Galus, the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. The Beis HaMikdash is the seat, the chair, the Merkava, the chariot, the physical or metaphysical framework on which the Eibishter is able to manifest, or manifests. When the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, when the chair is shattered, two very different processes take place. The first is Kutsha B'richu Solik Liyelo Liyelo. The level of Elokus called Kedusha, which is the higher level, the holiness, the removed level, the hovering level, ascends higher and even higher. And in Kabbalistic language, it ascends to Bina or Chochmah, and then it ascends to Atika Kaddish. In times of Galus, the Pnimius of Elokus, the higher level of godliness, which is manifest in the world and resting above the Shechina, which is sitting on the Mishkan, ascends upwards twice, La'elo, to Zoh and to Keser. Shechina has something called Galus HaShechina. And of course, this is discussed in Tanya, Nigeres HaTshuva, in Perek Dalet, Perek Hey, Perek Vav, and so on. And of course, also in other places, you have this idea of Galus HaShechina in Perek Yud Zayin, and in other places in Tanya, you have the phenomena of Galus HaShechina. Galus HaShechina means that the lower level of Elokus, which is called Shechina, descends into the lower world when there's no Beis HaMikdash and is exiled. Exiled means to say, as we're going to see in this Maamar, Eiseseinu Leira'inu, and Ein Itanu Yedeya Adma, the Shechina becomes lost in Galus. And because the Shechina is lost in Galus, godliness is completely concealed. If you've ever learned to get a Satshuva, you know that the idea is that when Shechina goes into Galus, there's a concept of extra. Yenika Sachitzainim, Klipa lives from Kedusha more than the times of the Beis HaMikdash. And there's a concept called Neitel Chelik B'Reish, it's unimportant. But if you examine this classic model of Galus and understand that in Galus the Pnimius ascends and departs, and the Chitzenius descends and is exiled, you'll appreciate how this Maamar is different. For starters, our Maamar is not going to speak about two levels of godliness. It's not going to separate Shechina from Kutsha B'richu. To the contrary, it's going to talk about the unity between the highest levels and the lowest levels, beginning with Ein Seif that is higher than Atzilus. How the Ein Seif, which is higher than Atzilus, comes into Chochmah, and then comes into Midas, and then comes into Malchus, and then descends to the lower worlds. So on the one hand, the model of Galus, which our Maamar is going to describe, does not involve the Pnimius ascending, but the Pnimius descending. Even in Galus. On the other hand, when you talk about Shechina and Zman HaGalus, in this Maamar, we're not going to speak how the lower levels of godliness become concealed and covered over and exiled, but to the contrary, even in the times of Galus, in the lowest worlds, there is Gilei Elokus if you choose to see it. As you'll see in the Maamar later on, the Rebbe is going to say that in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the Elokus was much easier to see because there were Isis and Moifs and Nisim and Niflois. In the times of Galus, it's concealed. You only have Hashgacha Pratis and Elokus, which is Melubish B'Teva. But if you pay attention, you'll see godliness as Mana Galus as well. In other words, in this Maamar, we're going to describe the idea of godliness descending from a higher level to a lower level. But this Maamar, first of all, does not separate the Pnimius Elokus and the Chetzenis of Elokus. Ve'ed, ve'gam ze ikir, it's not going to describe the Galus of the Chetzenis of Elokus as a Helam ve'hester. It's going to describe the Galus of Chetzenis of Elokus being revealed on lower levels in a more complicated way. That's the essence of this Maamar, what I just told you. And once you understand how this Maamar is going to explain to us Galus, that the Elokus, which comes from a higher level to a lower level, is a Galus brought to even lower levels, and it's not Ma'alim U'Masta, it's revealing Elokus in a lower way, in a more complicated way. And this insight is going to explain why you have to have twice Elish Meis B'nei Yisrael Aboyim Mitzrayim Yainkev and then Es Yainkev and Parshas Vayigash and another Parsha. And all the remaining questions are going to be resolved, as well as Shmeis B'nei Yisrael and Reuven, Shimon, Levi. All of these things are going to become explained based on the insight of Galus, which our Maamar is going to speak about. So now let's go back to the text and let's read. The first question was, why does it say twice that Yidden went into Galus? The second question is, how come one time it says Es Yainkev and the second time it says Yainkev? And the third question is that this difference in question 2 between Yainkev and Es Yainkev connotes that whether Yainkev is considered one of the Yud Beit Shvatim or is considered separate from them, Es Yainkev makes him separate. That's an Ar Parsha, Shmeis. And Yainkev Stam makes him one of the Shiftei Kor. We have to understand all of these things. Says the Rebbe on line 12, the answer to this question requires an introduction. Hine, Ksiv, it says in the Pasuk, in Parshas Miketz, Yored Yoradnu Batchil Lish Bareich, or the beginning of Parshas, we descended. And it says a double Lashon, Yored Yorad. Now, of course, we know that whenever you have a double Lashon in Torah, there's a whole sugya in Shas, which addresses L'shenes Kfules, and that Shimon always says, Dibra Teirek, Lashon, and the other, that it's just poetry, it's imprecise. But the Chachamim disagreed that when you have something 2 times, it means afilu me'ap yamim and so on. Here you have a story that the Yidden came to Mitzrayim and they described their coming into Mitzrayim as Yored Yorad. So one insight into the Yored Yorad would be this is simply a figure of speech, Dibra Teirek Eloshim B'nei Yadam. But there's a more meaningful type Yored Yorad, no Yerida Acha Yerid. When Yidden went into Galus, you should know that there's 2 Galias in each Galus. There's a Galus on higher level, which is Parshas Vayigash, and a Galus on a lower level, which is Parshas Shmeis. The same is true when we exited Mitzrayim then. And the Gula from there, it says in the Pasuk, also a double Lashon, V'nechi alcha gam olei. And then later on in the Chumash, you have the Lashon olei naila, a double Lashon of Aliyah. The ascent and departure from Galus is described in a double Lashon. And again, here you could say, Dibra Teirek Lashon the Yadam, but Chassidus doesn't want to do that. Instead, Chassidus says, Hainu Beis Aliyah. There's at least 2 ascents. Shu Iloi Achar Ili, you come out of Mitzrayim once, and then you come out of Mitzrayim a second time. And as you'll see soon, one of the explanations for the Yored Yoradnu and the Olei Naile is the Galus Mitzrayim and the Gula Mites Vashleime when Mashiach comes. So the Rebbe continues on line 15. And to be sure, Rabbi Yossi asked Mitzrayim when the Jewish people left Egypt. Leinis alu rak pam echad, there was only one aliyah. Because the pasuk describes it, Ale eschem meyoni Mitzrayim, the Eibush says, I will ascend, I will lift you up from the poverty in Mitzrayim, and I will take you v'geimer, to a land which flows milk and honey, and it doesn't say Olei Nail. And we learn from this that although the Eibush says Olei al chagam Olei, double lashon Olei Nail, the second aliyah didn't happen. Says the Rebbe on line 17, Ach the Teret says, Ki aliyah zu hashen is the second level of aliyah, which is described in the earlier psukim about the infant going out of Mitzrayim is Remezes al Gulo Asid Aliyah. It's a hint for the redemption which is destined to be B'meheira b'yameinu amen. So there was 2 Yeridis, and there's 2 Aliyahs. What's the circumstance, the time frame, the chronology of the 2 Yeridis? We don't know. But the chronology of the 2 Aliyahs, one Aliyah was then, the other Aliyah is going to be when Mashiach comes. What's the pshat? So the Rebbe answers the Hinik, if it says in the Pasuk Yimei, says Chameyeretz Mitzrayim, just like the Jewish people left Mitzrayim. There were incredible miracles that occurred. Similarly, Aren or the flies when Mashiach comes, there's going to be wonders and miracles that are going to happen then as well. In other words, Shabbat Ishakos of the Pasuk describes and compares Inyan Gula Achrein Aliyatzias Mitzrayim, the final Gula to the initial Gula. That in both cases is the from Galus, and in both cases the from Geula. And according to our Maamar, there's 2 Aliyahs. The Aliyah which is comparable to Geula from Galus Mitzrayim, and the Aliyah which is comparable to Geula, which is going to be the Yossi Lavi, which is the final Geula. And of course, you know from many Maamarim that when Yidden left Mitzrayim, there was supposed to be the Iyah, that we'd be able to see Elikus. In reality, there only was Shmiya. We're able to understand Elikus, but we can't see it except for Yechidei's Gula. Mashenk and Lasot Lavi, we're all going to have the Madrei Gavriya. That's one of the many, many different ways of explaining the Aliyah Achar Aliyah. Who, line 21, the pshat is Shekmei Shekol Ike Tachlis Umuchuven Megalos Mitzrayim. All of us understand Yidden went to Egypt, and they suffered in Egypt a Shibud, Vashibud of Redu Shana, 210 years of slavery. And of course, we know that there are so many aspects to this Galus and Geula. It was a melting pot which refined them and recreated them into a nation, because before they were individual tzaddikim, and as a result of going into this terrible cauldron, they came out as a nation. And of course, a nation consists of tzaddikim, beinim u'rishayim, as the word sibur indicates. That means to say that even the biggest Rasha, who's a member of the Jewish people, is a Jew. Mashen came before they went into Mitzrayim. If you were a Rasha, like for example, Esav a Rasha, you were out of the loop because it was not a nation but individual tzaddikim. So the furnace, the melting pot, the suffering in Mitzrayim transformed us from what our ancestors had been, a handful of tzaddikim, into a people who would receive the Torah. But in order for this to occur, there was a Gavaldike Yerida. We were almost completely lost. The Rambam writes, Kilu kot kola iker, sheshas lavram avinu. It's as if the entire tree and principle that Avram Avinu initiated was lost, and the Eibush and Moshe Rabbeinu, who was Raya Nem and Shal Yisrael, took us out of Mitzrayim. We came to the mountain Torah, we got the Torah from the Eibush. So Yetzias Mitzrayim is a culmination of much history. We went into Mitzrayim, we suffered, we were in a Korah Basel in a melting pot, and when we emerged, there was a condition of Yeridet Tzedek Aliyah, which brought us to be able to receive the Torah from the Eibush. Now, Derech Hagav, I want to give you another insight. The Rebbe has a wonderful sichos. It's not just one of my favorites, it's a favorite of many people. Look at the sichos Chelik Yud Zayin Pesach, page 78. It's a very, very long likut. It's like 15 pages long, where the Rebbe analyzes the whole Haggadah. It's brilliant, special. And the point that the Rebbe brings out in that sikh is this: that Yidden went into Mitzrayim and they had to go through slavery, suffering. But it didn't say any place that they needed to become assimilated into the pagan ways of Egypt. If the Jewish people got into Mitzrayim and remained loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and keeping whatever mitzvahs they kept, if they were B'nai Neach, with Sheva mitzvahs B'nai Neach, and B'nai Milah, whatever else, and they'd gone through the identical suffering, but had remained loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when the Geula from Mitzrayim came, they would have been so mitzurif, so corrected, so mavurer, so mezuchach, so menupe, so miyupe, that the Geula would have come. Mashiach would have come. And as a practical matter, when they would have received the Torah at Har Sinai 50 days after they left Mitzrayim, they would have immediately gotten the Torah of the Iyah. But because when they left Mitzrayim, they had fallen into Memtet Sharituma, and the Galus did not only enslave the Jewish people physically, it also lowered them and enslaved them spiritually. So when the redemption happened and the Gilead Lakus happened, the Jewish people found themselves ready to get the Torah, but undeserving, because the degree of refinement and clarification and uplifting that the Mitzrayim Galus is supposed to affect did not affect it fully. It was effective enough for them to receive the Torah, but it was not effective enough for them to receive what we call in our culture Pnimius HaTorah, the godliness of Torah, the Re'iyah of the Torah, because they were Shakua and Tum. And therefore, the way that Rebbe explains it in the Sikha, the Eibush had a choice to continue waiting until the Yidden deserve, and only then give them the Torah, or to give them the Torah in an undeserved state and spend their time deserving it. So there's 2 aliyahs, right? There's a going out of Mitzrayim and receiving the Torah, And there's going to be a second aliyah when we deserve the whole Torah, and we have the Torah and the Madrega of the Iyah. But before we get to that, let's begin again line 21. V'hu, shekemei shekol ikir tachal samechuv, the entire core, intent, and purpose. Galus, Mitzrayim, and the exile in Egypt. Vashi, what did it do? Shana, the 210 years of slavery. That we should receive the Torah from the Eibishter in a way of face to face. Ponim, bip, ponim. The Eibishter would speak to us. If it doesn't the pasuk when Moshe Rabbeinu asks the question, what schus do Yidden have? The Eibishter answers him, they don't have a schus yet, but they're going to have a schus later. This is their schus, that when you're going to take this nation out of Egypt, they're going to serve the Eibishter on this mountain. So Yetzias Mitzrayim was for Kabbalah Sateh. Continues Rabbi on line 25. This entire lengthy Galus is K'dei we should merit Lagile Pnimius HaTeira, the Neshama, the inner dimension of Teira, Sheyihiyah, which is going to be Liyasad Lavi when Mashiach comes. There's going to be another Gilui, and like I said before, the original Gilui was Shmiya, and the Gilui of Mashiach is in from the Iyah. And the prerequisite to the Torah and the Gilui of the Kus, which we're going to get, is Galus. It refines us, it makes us vessels for it, and through that process we're able to bring godliness down. You'll see later in Hashem, not in this week's Shir, but in next week's Shir, that this is not only about refinement actually. It's actually about creating a vessel. Godliness is ain't safe. For godliness to come down into the world on a worldly level, on a worldly plane, there has to be a vessel to be able to receive it. And all of these refinement, refining effects created the framework on which the Elokus is going to come down, and the medium between the refining of the Jew and the Elokus which is coming down is the Torah, as you'll see in Mitzvah Hashem in the next Shir. So Rabbi continues on line 27. Ki, b'matan Torah, yikaval Torah niglas. When the Eibishter gave us the Torah, we received the revealed Torah. What's the revealed Torah? Halacha l'maiseh is a what you have to do, what you're not allowed to do. What's a mitzvah, what's an aveda, and so on and so forth. And of course this includes also, Niglaten includes the Havana Vasaga, Seichel HaTorah. It's intellectually understanding the Torah. But the inyan of Ruach HaKodesh, the inyan of Nevuah, the inyan of experiencing the godliness of Torah, although it existed by some people, during some periods of our history, you cannot define the Torah. The Eibush gave us a Har Sinai by Pnimiyas HaTorah. Masha'en can have a Pnimiyas Taimei Torah, the inner dimension of the Torah, which is the Gishmak, the delight, the pleasure, the reasons of the Torah. Yagil Shalhem Liyasad Love is going to be revealed after Mashiach comes, even though now already there is on some level and to some extent an infant Taimei Torah, but it's temporary and it's for Yechidei Zgula. Liyasad Love is going to be for everybody. And what the pasuk says, and it flies just like when you left Mitzrayim. The Eibush revealed himself on Har Sinai and gave us the Torah. Similarly, when Mashiach comes, the Eibush is going to reveal himself a second time. Like Rashi says in the third pasuk of Shir Hashirim, Muftachane me'ite. That also leifia eid aleim and legalis sei tameh u'mister mitzpei neseh. The Eibush is going to reveal pnimiyas haTorah. And of course, the Rebbe Rashab says, and we all know this, that matan Torah vitnish not feitamo. There was only one event of giving the Torah. So although when Mashiach comes, there's going to be leifia eid aleim, Hashem is going to appear a second time, and there's going to be an infant Torah chadasha iti teitze or Torah iti teitze. But the pshat is that's the pnimiyas of the Torah we have now. But now we have only the tam and the seichel of the Torah and the halachas of the Torah and the ma'isa of the Torah. Also, we're going to have the taimei Torah, the pnimiyas of Torah, the lukus of Torah, the re'iyah of Torah, and so on. Because as the pasuk describes it, ayin ba'ayin, Mashiach comes, our eye is going to see the eye of godliness directly, and therefore the pasuk says, "Aren and flies." That la'ased laved is going to be a new Torah. It's the same Torah but on a deeper level, and relative to the Torah of now, it's a pellet. It's going to be shalei be'erech more. And therefore the Rebbe says, just like all of us understand, that you go out of each Galus and you get the Torah. Galus Mitzrayim gave us matan Torah, and the Galus ha'acharein gets us the pnimius, the gila pnimius that to be lasted love, says the Rebbe v'chein be'inyan ashibad v'agalus. Just as the Exodus gives us the Torah, two Torahs, two geulas on two different levels, similarly the Galus serves that purpose twice. Shanem Galus Mitzrayim Esrit my Galus Mitzrayim ve'yamar was chayim, the Mitzrayim made their lives embittered, right? Like it says in Chazal, b'veidas perach. Avedas noshim la'an noshim, anoshim la'noshim. They made them do unnatural work and so on. Bavei the kosh with hard work, b'chemer means with cement. Ubavena means with mud bricks. Ubachol aveda basada, all kinds of work in the field. So it says in Zeir on this pasuk that it goes on the Torah. That although bepashtus this pasuk is ein mikri yetzi midei pshute, it's described in Yiddish Tzaras and Mitzrayim. There's a pnimius of it just to do with Torah. So similarly, just like when Yidden left Mitzrayim, there was a Galus, and the Galus involved all kinds of hardship, and the hardship has the pnimius. Says the Rebbe, koi gam al zman ha'achrin. These same sukkim in Parshas Shemos are a reference to the Galus at the end of time, like I told you in my introduction. That Maisa of a Simin Labanim, every story that happened continues to happen again and again. So being in Mitzrayim, which the Torah compares to having Merirus HaChayim, and Aveda Kosha, and Chayim and Veinim, Chol Aveda Basada, the final Galus, are going to be the same thing. But, just like initially, similarly also in the Galus HaAchen, and perhaps more spiritually, this pasuk is understood to mean a davar pnimi. Is an allusion to Torah, to learning Torah and the struggles of learning Torah, which you're going to see in Mitzvah Hashem in the next series of pages. Shishim Heim Malaches, Shmeinim Heim Pilakshim, Allah Mesein Mispar, are all going to be explaining to us. As you see the kaisers that I made, I didn't write class 1, class 2, class 3. I wrote headlines about the Teichen of a Maamar as we go through it with Hashem's help. And you'll see over there the whole process how Galus brings the Gilui Elokus, brings the Torah down into this world. So he says, Vavei de Kasha Dokush. The spiritual idea of Vavei de Kasha is the questions you have in Torah. Bechemer, which means literally mortar, cement, Dokal V'chemer, the Derech Halimud of easy and hard. Ubachol Vavei de Basada. And of course he skips the word Leveinim, and he says them second, for reasons that I don't know, Tzarachi and Gadol, that Leveina means Libun Hilchasa. But in the Seder of our Maamar, first it says the Bechol Aveda Basada, all work done in a field, Do Braisa. Braisa goes on what's outside, secondary to the Mishnah. Uba Leveinim, Do Libun Hilchasa Leveinim, which means literally bricks, to whiten halachas. As you'll see in the Maamar, why the Alter Rebbe rearranges the Seder, because there's going to be different madregas. There's going to be Mishnah, and there's going to be Braisa, and there's going to be Gemara. And Mishnah, Braisa, and Gemara are going to represent these three levels. Vaveda Kosha and Bechemer Leveinim is going to be Mishnah. Kol Aveda Basada is going to be Braisa. And Leveinim Libun Hilchas is going to be Gemara, which is even lower than Braisa, which is why the Alter Rebbe puts it in this order, as you'll see in Mitzvah Hashem later on. So the Rebbe says that in the times when Yidden were Mitzrayim, they had Merirus HaChayim, Aveda Kosha, Chayim Leveinim, Chol Aveda Basada, physically and also spiritually. And the Zeir says this goes on struggling and understanding the Torah. The same is true in this final Galus. And this last point of Ulevein and Dalib and Hilchas, says the Rebbe, She'ein biyadeinu halacha berura. We don't have clear dinim. V'din barer and clear law. Ki kol dini ateirim machlekes Schneur. Every din in Torah is dependent upon a machlekes. Halal machshirin, these make kosher. Umetarin, they make pure. V'halal peis, these make unfit. Umetama, they make spiritually unclean. Machlekes. Now, of course, we know from the Gemara that machlekes has to do with the fact, like it says in the Gemara, Masechta Erev, and it's brought in the Sikh of the Rebbe, of Teireh Chadasha Me'iti Teitzi, that Leinitnu Divrei Teireh Chaduchen. The Eibush didn't give us a Shulchan Aruch, but rather Kedarbenis. The Eibush gave us Teireh in such a way that you have Memtes Ponim Tameh and Memtes Ponim Torah. The Teireh includes so many different interpretations of Tara L'Gedush. And the Eibishter wants that there should be an even Elu ve'elu Divid Elokim Chaim, that the Chachamim should debate it, argue about it. And we say that every single derech is correct. The only thing is, the different dracham are correct on a theoretical level, on an academic level, on a practical level. You can only do it one way. V'alacha, whatever the halacha is, k'havaye, k'harayv, and so on and so forth. So Torah is designed in such a way that you're never sure what the halacha is. You have to clarify it because there are different approaches. In conclusion, just like when Jews were enslaved in Egypt, there was the Chaymer and there was the Leveinim. And Zochel Matan Torah, these struggles brought them to Matan Torah, whether we explain them literally or spiritually. These struggles refined them to get the Torah from the Eibishter. The same is through a Mashiach comes Ad Liban Hilchas. By needing to struggle and clarify a halach, which the Rebbe is going to interpret later, doesn't go on Mishnah, doesn't go on Braisa, it goes on Gemara, which we do nowadays, we're going to merit to the face of the Torah, which is the neshama of the Torah, which is the godliness of the Torah. When Mashiach comes, and it flies, that it should be revealed to us in a way of re'iyas, like I said earlier. So there's two galiyos, there's two geulos, and there's two Torahs. So the Rebbe says on line 39, L'havin inyan liban hilchaseh. What's the pshat liban hilchaseh? Ve'chaydei zeh yegili l'asad lavi. How's it going to affect l'asad lavi? Now this answer to liban hilchaseh is going to appear on line 135 till line 143, where he speaks about alamis ein mispar. He's going to say this goes on halachas of the Ameroyim, and this is the info liban hilchaseh, which is lower than Mishnah and Braises. Ukafi sheyes by lakam, as we're going to explain later on in Mitzvah Hashem. So we opened the Maamar. It's a little bit hard for me to do this because I really gave you a very short sheet. I'm cheating you. But I have no choice, because if I start, I'll end up leaving you even more confused next week. We'll probably have to learn a lot of Kamas next week, because what we're going to learn is that the Torah is the process of godliness being brought from heaven to earth, from a higher level to a lower level. And Torah is the garment that brings it forward. Torah is the lavush, which the godliness is revealed in a higher level to a lower level. And the various levels of Torah are simply bringing the alakus even lower and even lower, which of course is connected to the idea of Yara Yaradnu, the various Yididis, which L'asad Love are going to bring the various Aliyas, Olei Naila, and so on and so forth. So tonight's shir was that there's more than one Galus, there's going to be more than one Geula, and it's not just a chronological thing, it's a spiritual thing. There's different levels in descent, and there's different levels in ascent. What we're going to find out in the next weeks is the nature of the descent into Galus, which is going to bring to the ascent when Mashiach comes.